Venezuela was once one of the richest countries in Latin America. So how did it transform into one of the most politically and economically divided nations in the world? The answer begins with one movement, the Bolivarian Revolution. The Bolivarian Revolution is a political and social movement, launched in 1999 by Hugo Chavez after he became president of Venezuela. It was inspired by Simón Bolívar, the leader who helped liberate much of South America from colonial rule. Chavez promised a new system focused on social equality, national sovereignty, and reducing poverty. His vision was to create what he called 21st-century socialism, moving away from the old political order that many felt had failed them. He argued that the country's vast oil wealth was not benefiting the majority of its citizens, and that a fundamental shift was needed to redistribute that wealth and empower the poor. This message resonated deeply with a large portion of the population who felt left behind by decades of economic inequality. The movement wasn't just about policies, it was about creating a new national identity, rooted in the ideals of independence and social justice championed by Bolívar nearly 2 centuries earlier. At the time, many Venezuelans felt excluded from the immense wealth generated by the country's oil industry. Chavez capitalized on this sentiment and, once in power, used high oil prices to his advantage. He directed the massive oil revenue to fund a series of social programs known as misiones, or missions. These programs were designed to tackle long-standing issues head-on, dramatically expanding access to free healthcare, education, and subsidized food and housing. For millions, these missions represented a tangible improvement in their quality of life. Doctors were brought into poor neighborhoods, literacy campaigns were launched, and new homes were built for families in need. These policies were incredibly popular and earned him strong, unwavering support, especially among the working class and rural communities who, for the first time, felt seen and prioritized by their government. This formed the core of his political base and was a key reason for his repeated electoral victories. The Bolivarian Revolution brought major, sweeping changes to the very structure of Venezuela. Key industries like oil, electricity, and telecommunications were nationalized, meaning they were brought under state control. The government argued this was necessary to ensure that the profits from these vital sectors served the public good, rather than private interests. One of the most significant changes was the drafting and approval of a new constitution in VHS 1999. This document officially renamed the country the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, increased the power of the executive branch, extended the presidential term, and reshaped many government institutions, including the legislature and judiciary. For supporters of the revolution, these moves were seen as a necessary empowerment of the state to act on behalf of the people and dismantle old, corrupt structures. However, critics warned that these changes were dangerously weakening democratic checks and balances, concentrating too much power in the hands of the president and eroding institutional independence. Over time, Venezuela began to face severe and growing economic challenges. The economy's heavy dependence on oil, which accounted for the vast majority of its export revenue, made it extremely vulnerable to fluctuations in global energy prices. When oil prices started to fall, government income plummeted, making it difficult to sustain the expensive social programs. Nationalization and price controls discouraged private investment, both foreign and domestic, leading to a decline in production across many sectors. This combination of factors contributed to soaring hyperinflation, chronic shortages of basic goods like food and medicine, and a sharp contraction of the economy. As economic conditions worsened, political polarization deepened. The opposition grew more vocal, and international criticism increased over issues of press freedom, human rights, and the overall state of governance. The dream of prosperity began to clash with a harsh reality. After the death of Hugo Chavez from cancer in 2013, his hand-picked successor, Nicolas Maduro, took office and vowed to continue the Bolivarian Revolution. However, he inherited a far more challenging situation. The steep decline in global oil prices that began shortly after he took power created an unprecedented economic crisis, far worse than anything experienced under Chavez. Governing became exponentially more difficult. Without the charisma of his predecessor or the booming oil revenue that had funded the revolution's early years, Maduro faced mounting internal and external pressure. The economic crisis spiraled, leading to widespread protests and a humanitarian emergency. Today, the Bolivarian Revolution remains the defining force in Venezuelan politics, but its legacy is deeply contested. It is still admired and fiercely defended by its supporters as a project of social justice and national dignity, while it is intensely criticized by opponents at home and abroad as the cause of the country's economic collapse and democratic backsliding. The Bolivarian Revolution didn't just change Venezuela, it sent shockwaves across Latin America and influenced politics throughout the region. For a time, Chavez's model of using resource wealth to fund social change inspired a wave of left-leaning governments, often called the Pink Tide. Leaders in countries like Bolivia, Ecuador, Uruguay, and Argentina looked to Venezuela as an example of how to challenge the traditional political and economic order. This created new regional alliances and shifted diplomatic dynamics, often putting these nations at odds with the United States. The revolution also ignited a fierce debate that continues to this day. It raised lasting fundamental questions about the role of the state in the economy, the best way to achieve wealth distribution, the limits of executive power, and the true meaning of democracy. These questions are not confined to Venezuela. They continue to shape political discourse and electoral contests across the entire region. Understanding Venezuela today is impossible without understanding the origins, goals, and consequences of the Bolivarian Revolution. It shaped every aspect of the country's modern reality, from its economy to its political divisions. If you found this breakdown helpful and want to learn more about the forces shaping our world, make sure to subscribe for more global history and political explainers. Thanks for watching.